Hello and welcome back to Purple Does Poison, a Druid Blight cast to life. So here we are at the end of the road, level 32. Really I only had to do one more quest from where you saw us in the lines of supply. We did the What Goes Up, the final part of the Stormhorns chain on Reaper 1, and I've had all manner of trouble, especially in that final section, running out of spell points and all sorts, with the constantly respawning opponents. But he sailed through there, no problem at all, with a mixture of crowd control and heavy AoE damage, and making nice use of the Core Lightning Storm and the Shard Storm to be sort of running round and have those ticking and taking care of things, especially as you're trying to smash away at those pillars. If there's annoying opponents sort of harrying you, just leave those things to tick and to take care of them, and they did it very well. I'm a bit disappointed I can't show you some end game play with this like I did with the Warlock. The Warlock was supposed to be his end game build, so I'd gone to some length to farm the gear required for that. I'm not going to do that for this, because for the sake of one episode to go to all that trouble farming all the gear, I just don't see it as being worthwhile. But given what we've seen in the later epic quests, I'm more than confident that this, even on a low past life build with decent gear, this build could do really well. I think he would stroll through legendary Reaper 4 mostly with the crowd control he's got and the AoE damage, and he'd probably be pretty decent on 6 as well. The only reservation I've got is obviously the self-healing when in combat. It's as we've seen, it can be problematic. One interesting thing would be the armour. Could we get him some... I'm pretty sure we could get him some better armour than the rags he's wearing at the moment, and that would be a nice source of extra defence, because at the moment he's very glass cannony. My other druid, my cold druid, has a shield, a small shield, so he can still use evasion, but a shield, and actually it's a shield and light armor, but even so he has way more defense than this fella does. So let's just finish off with the feats that we took towards the end. So we took at 30, where is the legendary feat? There we go, Scion of the Plane of Earth. Now just look at what you get for this and how nicely it tallies with the build. 4 DCs on Conjuration and Transmutation. Well, Conjuration is the signature spell, the Acid Well, which we've kind of focused on. Transmutation is very nice to help the Grasping Thorns. Now that's been criminally underused, in my opinion, in this playthrough. Not because it's no good, far from it. It's just because this contagion, this stun, has been so far beyond my expectations that we never really needed to lean on anything else. Just throw that in from halfway across the map, stop the things, and blast them with your Acid Well. That was the strategy, and my god, for most of the stuff it just wiped the floor with them. So has it been effective? Absolutely. It's definitely surpassed my expectations. Been really good fun. So yeah, I've digressed again, haven't I? 4 on Conjuration and Transmutation, both useful for us. 2 on all the other DCs, which is nice for our Necro. 20 PRR, which is great for shoring up some of the lacking defences we've got. Acid and Poison focus there, so extra Acid and Poison spell power and crit damage. So all in all, a really nice ending legendary feat, I think. With that, unfortunately, I've not got to play test it, but I've always wondered what this Master of the Wilds might be like. I've seen some debate on it in the forums, you know, whether it's worth taking, whether it does anything much for these spells that's concerned. Now, looking at the spells, two of them I don't use at all. Produce Flame and, well, the Creeping Cold, I use Greater Creeping Cold, so I presume that's not affected either. And the Call Lightning, is that called? That's Call Lightning Storm. So three of them I don't use at all. But the Salt Ray and the Word of Balance I use literally all the time. The Salt Ray more as a hold, but it does do damage, and it's capped at level 10, so if it gets another 10 caster levels, it could be doing quite a bit more oomph there. And the Word of Balance is my go-to against Reapers, so if that got another 10 levels, I don't understand. Maybe one of you could chime in here and explain exactly how it works, because this is maximum caster level, and I think maybe some people were debating that you can't actually reach the maximum caster level with some, like maybe this Word of Balance, you can't get it all that way up to the extra 10. I don't know, but I would love a souped up version of that anyway, because it's something I lean on quite heavily, especially against the Reapers. So I threw it in there, but if you didn't fancy that, you could always go with one of the spell focus, like Epic spell focus Conjuration we could have had for our Acid Well, or we could have put Necro to make our Contagion a bit better for the DC chance to hold the things. And at 31 I took Epic Spell Power Cold to go with the acid and poison that we already had. So you'll recall that for each, the cold would have been for the tsunami. I found myself using that quite a lot against the groups closing in on me. The way I found myself playing, if everything went to plan, we would freeze a group from distance with the contagion, hammer it with the acid well, and job done. But if things weren't going to plan, which was often in that last quest, the what goes up, with the big groups of things rushing you from all over the place, then at close range, this tsunami, if it didn't kill them, it usually knocked them down and allowed me to finish them with something else, like the Carrion Swarm. So it kept them from getting right up close and personal, which obviously this build does not like at all. So that's why I took the cold, and then for each one of those we've got 5% universal spell crit damage, which is nice. So I think we did a pretty good job with the feats. They kind of picked themselves, didn't they? Poison and acid, because that's what the build's all about. Cold for tsunami, and crush weakness, that seemed to work very well. I did think I noticed a definite bump up in the damage when we had targets stunned by this contagion thing, and then we followed up with a blast like a big acid well. Notably, in the end of that Delirious Tomb one, where those 3 Reapers popped up at the end, we froze them and just smashed them, and I was there thinking, oh, is that it? Well, that was a hell of a moment. Okay, so that's the feats. I'm not going to go over any kind of gear or stats numbers, because they'd be pretty meaningless. We don't have any legendary gear on. You want to be looking to push your main casting stat up towards 100, and as you can see we've only got 60 at the moment. So it's not representative of where the build could and should be. What else was I going to say? We don't really need to discuss that. Yeah, let's have a look at where the enhancements ended. So I'd started off with some in the Vistani for the deflect arrows, and ended up going more attacking. So more or less completely max in the Blight caster for the capstone, which I didn't use that too much, the spell side of it, the Creeping Doom. I tended to use it against boss targets only. Maybe that was my fault, maybe that was underused and could have done better for us. I didn't like the fact that it's like this swarm of insects and it goes like at 2 miles an hour towards the target, so you do have to wait a while. It's not like the Word of Balance that you can just hammer on a target from distance. So yeah, capstone here, all the good things in here, and up to the 5th core in here. Now even if you don't like and don't want to use, which I did use them sparingly, the Sunburst and Storm of Vengeance SLAs, that Storm of Vengeance comes in handy against a boss or a big end boss room, and just for a bit of supplementary ticking damage. And this one I like to use against shadows for double damage. But even if you don't like those two, they're worth taking. For the each core gives you +5 in your season. So our season, winter season, +5 spell power on cold, acid, earth, force, physical and electric. Just absolutely made for this build. Everything in there is what we were doing. So just for the sake of 1 point, very nice to add those in. So we were getting +25 on all those spell powers, and all the extra crit chance here as well in our season. So this is all something that we wouldn't get access to, or rather that is extra crit chance as well if we were a standard druid. So I think there's definitely a help in being in the Blight caster and having access to this second caster tree. That did help us out, and the double maximize strategy definitely worked well for saving the mana. That in conjunction with the evergreen in the primal destiny really worked nicely for us. So we were more or less all our points spent in the 2 caster trees. I kept 1 point in there for the cat, the white cat, for 5 force and universal spell power. That's not terrible for 1 point spent. And then we had a couple of points in human tree for a wisdom and a healing amp. I was wondering, I guess I don't have to make the decision now, but I was wondering where we might have gone with the epic destinies at the end. If any of you has any suggestions, I'd be happy to hear them. Obviously we're invested most in this primal tree, but I'm not sure about the tier 5s in here. Summons, I'm never been that keen on summons. Plus on spell DCs is just like standard in any caster tier 5. Now Mass Frog I've never actually used. The first thing I noticed there is the prohibitively long cooldown, and the second is it's just up to 6 nearby enemies. So if you're surrounded by about 20, it's not going to do too well. What's this? Greater form. Cooldown 5 minutes. The things have to be close to you for that to be. Yeah, I'm not feeling it, the tier 5s in this tree, I must say. But then we probably wouldn't have had enough. Well, definitely with what we've got invested here, we wouldn't have had enough points to go tier 5 anywhere else. So maybe it would have been a case of taking, I don't know, maybe Mass Frog and the DCs and the 4th core and settling at that and allocating the other points between these. Maybe the Shadowcaster here would have been nice, and the Necro DCs, something like that. half of me is glad we didn't have to play at the cap, so I didn't have to make these decisions. Because the way I go, I could have seen myself swapping and changing all over the place until I was satisfied with it. Right. Let's just have a quick word about the spells that we've used the most. I won't go into all the spell lists. I'll just discuss what's on the bar, because obviously what's not on the bar is not really getting used. These are obviously all our meta magics. Since we got the evergreen, we've had everything switched on, and I've very rarely, if ever, run into trouble with running out of mana, so that's been great. Those are just our epic toggles and druid toggles, hive master. So here we have our buffs, the energy resistances, death ward, very nice. That was kind of the signature one for the Blight caster, the one that the standard druid doesn't get. So that was very nice to have, so I'm not messing about with clickables to get the shield or night shield effect. Jump, freedom of movement, excellent. And that was my extra spell power, which I explained in a previous episode. I think you get that from Commendations of Valor. I was scrolling the fire shield because this Blight caster doesn't get access to any fire spells, so he would only have had the fire shield cold, I think. The hot version, it would have had to be on a scroll anyway. I don't use it too often. If you didn't know, it reduces incoming damage of the opposite element by 50%, so if we're expecting a lot of cold damage, we put fire shield hot, and incoming cold damage is reduced by 50%. Right. Oh, and that I had that protection from elements on because the third core in the primal tree gives that a big boost. Now, if you really want the truth, I was casting all the things from this line and forgetting that I had an extra one down there most of the time. But I put it there to... sometimes I remembered it. Okay, so now we're going into the things that I use more regularly. So against bosses or nasty single targets with lots of health, I would often lead with poison, because that combined with our poison of the... oh Christ, if I could just press the right button just once. With our poison of the Hydra from the Blightcaster tree, debuffs things to take full poison damage for 30 seconds. So often I would lead with poison, follow up with the two poison and acid SLAs, and that would then tick for some heavy damage on any boss target, or indeed Reaper, because Reapers are immune to poison. So if I didn't have such a decent Reaper hammer in Word of Balance, I would probably use the Carrion Swarm with the poison debuff to give the Reapers the full damage. Earthquake. Now, Earthquake and Grasping Thorns kind of fall into a similar category here. Both are very good, especially on this build, because this build has extra damage for both. The Earthquake benefits from the 5th core in the Blightcaster tree, extra acid damage, and this Grasping Thorns benefits from both the Defiled Growth for neg damage and the Vile Thorns for acid damage, or poison damage if you prefer. As I explained before, I've so badly underused those two, but only because this Contagion, as you've seen, was so overperforming that I just never felt the need. The casting animation is so fast, you can cast it from such distance when you've got Enlarge on it, so before things have even had a chance to see you and adjust to you, you've held them, and in an ideal world hammered them with the acid well and they're gone. So excuse me. So these two, very good, but Contagion better. That would be my conclusion. Sunburst, you've heard me say, it's nice for the blinding effect if you've got, I mean, my standard druid, often, because he doesn't have anything like this contagion thing to rely on, his holds, the greater colour spray and greater shout, they're done from close range. So the best he can do at distance, he uses the earthquake a lot more. He leads with ice storm to slow things down, then the earthquake to kind of hold them in place, and then the sunburst to blind them. So any sort of sneaky types that he's grouping with would do very well out of that. So yeah, that's I might as well mention that's an area where this build has a distinct advantage in my opinion over the standard druid, being able to do what is effectively a mass hold from halfway across the map, just like a bard or a sorcerer could from a position of extreme safety. The standard druid can't do that, so definitely advantage Blightcaster for that. For that kind of thing though, you pay in terms of the healing potential, as I've non-stop moaned throughout the life. Sleet Storm, very nice situationally. You saw me put it to good use in the Lines of Supply quest, where there's a big group of things or respawning things. You can throw that down, it lasts for ages, and it's 50% slow without a save, so that's very handy for keeping things sort of relatively pinned down and stopping them from swarming you. Acid Rain, we used the SLA to very good effect. Was it that? No, where was the Acid Rain? I think that was, yeah, the fourth tier in the Blight tree. We used that to very good effect. I think it was, I can't remember who it was, I do apologise. One of you suggested, when I was floundering a bit, throw the Grasping Thorns down, combine that with Acid Rain. That was in sort of early to mid heroic, and that worked really well. We didn't need anything else to dispose of most targets, most groups, so that was very good. It kind of fell away a little bit later on, probably because of how devastating the acid well is by comparison, and then once you get the epic abilities, this Carrion Swarm, that's AoE as well, it costs so little, and you've got all your meta magics on it as well, so it got put to one side. But at the time when it arrived, it was very decent. We were leaning on it pretty heavily, so that was a good one. Acid Well, you know all about, needs no introduction. That was our signature spell and totally didn't disappoint. Massive AoE to go with the big AoE of Contagion, so hold, kill, job's done. Tsunami I used significantly less than I would on my Cold Druid, obviously, because that's one of the, well, that's kind of the signature spell of the Cold Druid. And the playstyle was very different, as I've already discussed. We were doing things at quite extreme range with this one, whereas the Cold Druid is a lot more in-your-face playstyle. It needs to be because of its crowd control and its damaging spells. Dragon Breath and Tsunami are, you know, close range cone things. So there's a distinctly different playstyle there. But yes, when things were getting tough and things were threatening to swarm me, I would throw that in, and what it didn't kill, it often just put on the ground and gave me a bit of breathing space. So still very good. Finger of Death, we did use it, and nice sort of fitting in with the sort of Blightcaster theme. I should probably have made a bit more use of this. I definitely enjoyed the sort of death from distance aspect, you know, just picking things off at distance, nasty things. You do run into quite a few of the crowns having death ward, so that's a bit but it's lovely when it works, and I enjoyed that one. Contagion I think I've said enough about. I think you'll all switch off if I mention that anymore. Coupled with this enhancement, I think from memory I took a while to warm to this. It wasn't working very well at first, but once you get your DC up and it starts holding everything and big groups of everything, you start thinking, whoa, we've found something here. And that was probably the find of the whole thing to me. I kind of expected the acid well to be good, but I certainly didn't expect this to be good enough that we just wouldn't even consider going in the Fade Arc tree for greater colour spray. Those are just my potions and bits and pieces. Right, so this row of 3 were my damage over time for nasty things. So we had the Black Dragon Bolt, Creeping Doom SLA from the capstone there, and Greater Creeping Cold. So I would throw those 3 in on a boss or a nasty target. And also I think you saw me do this at the end of the Lines of Supply, the lightning storm things against the big giant guy. These two, the Shard Storm and the Core Lightning Storm, I think you've seen enough of my play with this build to know what happens with them. Especially useful in a situation like in the Offer of Blood quest, where there's constantly respawning stuff and you just have to keep moving, don't be stopping and loitering. These things can keep killing stuff around you without you even looking or even being aware of it, and allowing you to keep going without being fear of being swarmed. So I thoroughly enjoyed those. If nothing else, it's extra damage as well against a boss target. And another good reason to keep the Shard Storm ticking is the extra temp hit points you can get when you take this third core enhancement. Shard Reflection for 12 seconds when used, giving you 25% of your maximum hit points as temporary hit points. So at the moment, can we do it? Yeah. So you see we've got a 300 buffer there. Sit down. So not amazing in Epic, partly due to the fact my hit points are not particularly awesome, but still something. And when you couple that with the what was I getting? I was probably getting at least 300, or we can work it out, can't we? Is it Wisdom score times 5, so 60. What is it? This Death Eater stack size is 5. Equal to Wisdom score. So 6, 12, 18, 24. Yeah, so it was 300, give or take. And then put that thing on top of it. So we could have had a temporary 600. Still nothing amazing, but half decent, we'll say. Carrion Swarm, we've covered this much too. I struggled to adjust initially when I first reached the Epic. You probably remember I was criminally underusing this, especially given the low mana cost and the fact we were struggling for mana before we got the Evergreen. Really decent, especially when coupled with the Poison of the Hydra that you can throw in to debuff against the poison. Salt Ray, that was a staple. As soon as I got the Evergreen, because I could throw it in, I like it's one of the ones that benefits from the heightened spell the most, because it's only a level 3 spell. So we were boosting it up to cast it at level 9, and it was stunning all sorts of stuff. That's a helpless stun, so whatever you follow up with does extra damage. And then the Word of Balance again needs no introduction. My Reaper Slayer, just really good, works very nicely. Even if it only does half damage against a target, it's still hitting pretty heavily. So I was more than happy with that. I'll say I knew exactly what to expect from that one because of my time with the standard druid. who also uses that against the Reaper targets. The heals, so we've got Cocoon from Primal as a cheap top up between fights, and then we've got our Greater Vigour and Regenerate. So the two big ones you're missing as a Blight caster are the Regenerate Mass, which will obviously only hurt you if you're grouping, and the heal spell itself, which is a big miss when you're in a tight corner. But if you were playing on Elite or below, I don't see there being any problem. There's more than enough here to keep you going. One thing I didn't do, I mean, it's a difficult one, this, when you're surviving so much on temporary hit points, you can never quite predict a point at which you're going to start struggling for health, unless it's against a boss. Because the sort of pinch points, when the temporary hit points aren't refreshing anymore, when you get to the end you're fighting just that one boss and he's hammering away at you, you're taking damage but you're not refreshing your temporary shield by having more kills. So that's the point at which I probably should have triggered all these three, you know, in anticipation of taking damage, rather than waiting for the damage, then hitting the heals and realising it was too late. And that one, Panacea, just a nice way to get rid of all life's nasty little problems, blinded, diseased, all this kind of stuff. My UMD, as you probably remember, as we went through the playthrough, was too low for much of the playthrough to be casting Greater Resto Scrolls. So this Panacea was one way around that, because that deals with much of the things that you would want a Greater Resto to do, with the exception of the level drains. Now the regeneration can deal with one drained level each tick, so that wasn't such a big problem. I think we used that to good effect in the Spinner of Shadows quest, because she takes your Death Ward away and then starts draining levels. What am I looking for? UMD 41. So I think that would be alright for Greater Resto Scrolls at the cap. Maybe not no fail, but with Greater Heroism on top, that probably would be no fail. I think it's a 44 for Greater Resto, so it would be alright. Just it was a bit painful during the leveling process. I'm going to have to find a new vantage point, because I think I've used this one before, staring out across the harbour. I've been waffling on that long, the dawn's broken here now. Right, I think that's just about all on the build. You've seen the play style if you've been following through. Loads of fun. I would definitely recommend you give it a go. If you're wondering, the past life for it is one that will probably help Purple if he's going to stay as an acid warlock, a tanky acid warlock, because he makes use as well of these two primal spell-like abilities. So the past life gives 5 acid and 5 poison spell power. Now if I'd have been doing it just for that, there's no way I would have gone through all this just for that. I did it for the playthrough, for the experience. Which brings me neatly on to the last thing. I will post a summary of this in the description, but we've kind of been discussing already tentatively some ideas for the following life for Purple. I plan to take him right back to 1 and start again with something new. And I thought maybe I could go through some of what's on the table and what I could add. One of you mentioned a Dark Apostate caster. Now, I have no experience at all of that, so that could be interesting. I mean, we could look into several of the newer archetypes. Stormsinger Bard, that could be one. I don't think anybody suggested that, but that could be a fun one to try. I have played that previously, and I enjoyed the lightning thing. It does give it quite a an atmospheric feel. You get the feel with the lightning that there's something different here to the standard bard, just chucking the sonic things around, and more damage potential, especially single target damage potential, which is the big Achilles heel of the standard Spellsinger, in my opinion. Wizard, any kind of wizard. Favoured Soul, Sorcerer, Artificer. One of you mentioned Paladin. I'd be happy to try as one of those, although gear-wise, Lord knows what we'd do, but it could be fun to go along and see what we can find. Same for Barbarian. I wouldn't have gear for that, but I'd be happy to try that if people wanted to see it. Alchemist definitely got mentioned as a suggestion. I should try and slow down here, shouldn't I? Mincing my words. I think what was mentioned was an inquisitive alchemist. Now I've never tried that, to be honest, but I have tried the Bombard one, the caster, and I've thoroughly enjoyed the kit that has. The combination of nice crowd control and the AoEs is great fun. Arty, I think I would probably try and do some form of caster Arty. I don't know anything about that, so that could be interesting. And what else have I got written down? Maybe the Dark Hunter archetype, although I hesitate to suggest ranged things, because I have a ranged character myself, a bow user, and it's pretty painful trying to level those things solo, because they have little to no crowd control, little to no AoE. So when things get tough, as in plenty of those quests in the Stormhorns, you know, when things start swarming around you, there's not a lot you can do apart from just back off and back off and back off and hope you can sort of outlast it. For one, it's like watching paint dry, you know, for anybody who's observing it, because it seems to go on forever, just plink, plink, plink. And for two, it's just not very effective until you get into the cap and you're in a group and you've got people to take the heat off you. I've played my bow build in Reaper 6 and above, and he's been really effective with the single target damage. The single target damage is where it's at for the bow builds, just devastating. But as a project for the 1 to 30 life, I can see that being quite painful. So I would prefer to steer clear of that if possible. So I think the best options would be either casters or AoE melees, like the two-handed Paladin or Barb. So those are the options that are on the table. I'll put the list in the description. If any of you would be kind enough to throw down some suggestions, what you might like to see, that would be great. Failing that, in a few days or so's time, I'll make a choice, and we'll see what we see. I'd like to thank all of you for following along, for the many positive feedbacks I've had. I hope it's given you a smile here and there, or maybe you've learned a thing or two, or in some cases you've taught me a thing or two, which is fine, because you never stop learning in a game like this. So yeah, thanks very much for following along. Hope to see you in the next one. You take care of yourselves, and I will speak to you soon. Bye bye.